Story number 1. The Vanishing Santa of Cedar Ridge. The Alaskan winter is a relentless force, a vast expanse of white that swallows sound and sight alike. Nestled in the rugged mountains of Oregon, Cedar Ridge stood as a silent sentinel, its snow-covered slopes hiding secrets that the cold night kept hidden from prying eyes. I'm Jake Peterson, a lifelong resident of the nearby town of Pine Ridge. Growing up in these mountains, I'd heard countless stories of strange happenings, of spirits that roamed the wilderness. But nothing had ever felt real until that Christmas Eve. It was December 24th, just 2 days before Christmas. The snow had been falling steadily for weeks, turning the landscape into a serene, almost magical winter wonderland. My wife, Laura, and our teenage son, Ben, decided to take a drive up to Cedar Ridge, seeking the peace and solitude that only the mountains could provide. We'd heard about a remote cabin for rent, a perfect getaway from the hustle and bustle of city life. The drive was long, the roads treacherous with ice and snow. As we approached the summit, the view was breathtaking, majestic pines draped in snow, the moonlight reflecting off the ice-covered ground, creating a tapestry of shimmering light and shadows. The cabin was quaint, an old wooden structure that had clearly seen better days. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and the windows were frosted over, obscuring the view inside. We unpacked quickly, the anticipation of a quiet night settling in. Ben was excited to explore the area, while Laura busied herself with lighting the fireplace and preparing a simple dinner. After a hearty meal, we settled into the living room, the fire crackling and casting a warm glow over the room. Ben was restless, yearning to explore the snowy wilderness. I suggested a walk. The idea met with eager approval from both Laura and Ben. Bundling up once more, we ventured out into the night, the snow crunching under our boots as we made our way down the trail that led away from the cabin. The air was crisp, the silence of the night broken only by the distant howl of an owl and the soft rustling of the trees. The moon hung low, its light casting eerie shadows across the snow-covered ground. We walked in comfortable silence, the peace of the moment soothing our souls. About an hour into our hike, Ben suddenly stopped, pointing toward the middle of the empty road ahead. There, standing in the snow, was a man dressed in a Santa Claus suit. His red coat was slightly tattered, and his beard looked unkempt, giving him a disheveled appearance. He stood motionless, holding a large sack slung over his shoulder, staring intently at us. "Santa," Ben whispered, his eyes wide with confusion and awe. I slowed my pace, exchanging a puzzled glance with Laura. "That's odd," I murmured. "There's no one else out here. Maybe he's lost," Laura suggested gently, approaching cautiously. I nodded, walking up to the figure. "Hi, Santa. Do you need any help?" He didn't respond. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, his eyes meeting mine with an unsettling intensity. "Ho ho ho," he said softly, a hollow echo that sent a chill down my spine. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he began to fade, his form dissolving into the air like mist in the morning sun. We stood there, stunned, the cold wind picking up around us. Ben looked back toward the cabin, expecting to see someone waiting, but there was no one. The only evidence of his presence was the set of fresh footprints that trailed off into the distance, disappearing into the snow without a trace. "Did you see that?" Ben asked, his voice shaky. I nodded, feeling a knot of unease form in my stomach. Yeah, that was strange. We decided to head back, the encounter leaving an uneasy tension between us. As we walked, the silence of the night seemed to close in around us, the snow-covered trees whispering secrets we couldn't understand. When we reached the cabin, the warm glow from the fireplace greeted us, a stark contrast to the cold and darkness outside. We settled in, the memory of the ghostly Santa lingering in our minds. Laura tried to reassure us, but there was something unshakable about that encounter. Hours passed, and we drifted into an uneasy sleep, the fire burning low, It wasn't long before the peace was shattered by a series of strange noises, whispers that seemed to emanate from within the walls, the sound of footsteps echoing in the empty halls, and the soft jingle of bells that filled the room with an otherworldly ambience. I woke with a start, the whispers still faint but growing louder, pressing against my consciousness. Ben was awake too, his eyes darting around the room, while Laura sat up, her face pale with fear. "Did you hear that?" Ben asked, his voice trembling. "Yes," I replied, getting out of bed. "I think something's wrong." We followed the sound, the whispers guiding us towards the hallway. The soft jingle of bells grew louder, more distinct, as if someone was walking around the house. The air felt thick with a presence we couldn't see, a malevolent force that seemed to be watching us. As we turned a corner, the sight that greeted us was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Standing in the middle of the hallway was the same man in the Santa suit, his form flickering like a candle in the wind. But this time, there was no fading. He stood solidly before us, his eyes dark and hollow, his smile twisted into something sinister. "Ho ho ho," he repeated, the sound now carrying a note of malice. "Merry Christmas." I stepped forward, trying to muster the courage to confront him. "What do you want?" He didn't respond, merely standing there, the air around him growing colder, the temperature dropping to an unbearable level. The whispers became a cacophony, the voices of lost souls crying out for help, their anguish filling the room. Ben clutched my arm, pulling me back. "We need to leave," he urged, his voice barely above a whisper. But as we turned to flee, the man began to move, gliding effortlessly towards us, the jingle of his bells echoing ominously through the hallway. The walls seemed to stretch and warp, the floor beneath our feet turning slippery and treacherous. I could feel the malevolent energy closing in, the presence pressing down on us with an unbearable force. Desperate to escape, I grabbed my phone to call for help, but it was dead, no signal. Just the blank screen mocking my desperation, summoning every ounce of bravery. I tried to move, but the room resisted our efforts. The door wouldn't budge, the knob refusing to turn no matter how hard we tried. The Santa figure loomed closer, his eyes burning with an otherworldly light, his presence suffocating. "Remember us," he intoned, his voice a hollow echo. "Honor the traditions that bind us together." With that, the room began to distort, the walls closing in as shadows danced menacingly around us. The whispers intensified, overlapping with the jingle of bells and the chilling laughter that seemed to emanate from every corner. The temperature plummeted further, our breaths visible in the frigid air as fear clawed at our hearts. I reached out, trying to grasp hold of something, anything, to anchor myself, but my hands met only empty air. The oppressive atmosphere pressed down on us, the weight of unseen eyes watching our every move. Ben and Laura stood beside me, their faces etched with terror as the Santa figure advanced, the lines between reality and nightmare blurring into a nightmarish tableau. "Please, let us go," Laura pleaded, her voice quivering with fear. "We mean no harm." But the cursed Santa only laughed, a sound devoid of joy and filled with bitterness. "You took from us, forgot our legacy. Now, you must remember." As he reached out a hand, the room exploded with light and sound, the chaos overwhelming our senses. The walls seemed to dissolve, the ground beneath us shifting and breaking apart as we fell into darkness. The last thing I saw was the twisted smile of the ghostly Santa before everything went black. Story number 2. Santa's Shadow on the Midnight Road. The Alaskan winter is a relentless force, a vast expanse of white that swallows sound and sight alike. My name is Michael Reynolds, and that Christmas night remains etched in my memory, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between reality and the unknown. I had always found solace in the solitude that Alaska offered. As a wildlife photographer, my job often took me deep into the wilderness, capturing the untouched beauty of nature. But that Christmas Eve, my solitude was shattered by an encounter that defied explanation. I was driving home after a long day in the field, the sun having set hours ago, leaving the landscape cloaked in darkness. The road stretched endlessly ahead, flanked by dense forests that seemed to close in as night deepened. The snow had fallen steadily throughout the day, creating a pristine blanket that muffled the usual sounds of nocturnal wildlife. My truck's heater was working overtime, battling the biting cold that seeped through every crevice. I glanced at the clock, 11:45 p.m., just a few miles more, and I'd be home, enveloped in the warmth of my family's Christmas celebration. Exhaustion weighed heavily on me, the day's fatigue pressing against my eyelids. As I navigated the winding road, my headlights illuminated the path ahead, cutting through the thick darkness. That's when I saw him. A man dressed in the traditional red and white garb of Santa Claus, standing motionless in the middle of the road. His figure was stark against the snowy backdrop, his presence both jarring and surreal. I slowed the truck to a stop, my heart pounding in my chest. The man stood there, holding a large sack slung over his shoulder, his face partially obscured by a bushy white beard. There was something unsettling about him. His eyes seemed too hollow, his smile too fixed. "Santa," I called out, my voice wavering between skepticism and genuine concern. "Do you need help?" He didn't respond. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the only sound the distant howl of the wind through the trees. I reached for my phone, intending to call for assistance, but it was dead, no signal. Just the blank screen mocking my desperation, summoning my courage. I stepped out of the truck, the cold air biting at my skin as I approached the mysterious figure. As I drew closer, the man began to fade, his form becoming translucent, the edges blurring until he was nothing more than a ghostly apparition. I stopped inches away, feeling an inexplicable pull, a mix of fear and pity swirling within me. "Santa," I whispered again, reaching out a hand that met only air. The man's smile widened unnaturally before he vanished completely, leaving behind only smudged handprints on the glass of my truck and an overwhelming sense of dread. I stood there, frozen, the cold settling into my bones as I tried to comprehend what had just happened. The snow continued to fall, the silence oppressive in its intensity. My mind raced with questions. Was it a trick of the light? A hallucination from exhaustion? But deep down, I knew something far more sinister was at play. As I turned to get back into the truck, the faint noise caught my attention. It was a rhythmic tapping, soft yet persistent, coming from behind me. My pulse quickened as I glanced over my shoulder, the headlights casting long, eerie shadows across the snow. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely steady. The tapping continued, growing louder, more insistent. I took a hesitant step forward, the crunch of snow under my boots the only sound breaking the tension. There, at the edge of the light, stood another figure, this one more menacing, shrouded in darkness. His form was indistinct, a shadowy presence that seemed to absorb the surrounding light. The tapping turned into a slow, deliberate knocking, echoing through the stillness of the night. I backed away, my mind racing to find a logical explanation. Panic set in as the realization dawned that I was not alone, and whatever was out there, it was not human. The temperature dropped further, my breath visible in the frigid air as fear clawed at my throat. Desperate to escape, I fumbled with the truck door, my fingers numb from the cold. As I finally managed to unlock it, the shadowy figure began to advance, each step deliberate and threatening. My heart pounded in my chest as I sprinted towards the vehicle, the maniacal tapping now a cacophony of sounds that seemed to echo from the depths of the forest. I dove into the truck, slamming the door shut and fumbling for the keys. As I started the engine, the heater roared to life, battling the icy grip that held the night. I accelerated, the truck surging forward as the shadowy figure reached the doorway, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Behind me, the tapping ceased abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. The road ahead twisted and turned, the headlights revealing only more snow-covered wilderness as I sped away from the haunting presence that had stalked me through the night. Breathing heavily, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the ghostly Santa chasing after me. But there was nothing, only the endless expanse of snow and darkness. Relief washed over me, tempered by the lingering fear of what I had encountered on that desolate Alaskan road. I didn't speak for the rest of the drive. The memory of that night etched into my mind like a permanent scar. The encounter left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the legends and myths that haunted the vast wilderness of Alaska. Was it a manifestation of lost souls seeking redemption? A warning of some ancient curse tied to the land? Or something entirely beyond comprehension? When I finally pulled into my driveway, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, casting a pale glow on the snow-covered landscape. My family greeted me with warm embraces and concerned questions, unaware of the terror that had unfolded in the quiet of the night. That Christmas remained a somber reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, the known and the unknown. I often find myself staring out into the snowy expanse, wondering if I'll ever encounter those ghostly figures again, or if the shadows will remain silent, guarding their secrets in the heart of the Alaskan wilderness. Story number 3. Whispers of the Forgotten. The snow had started to fall the moment we arrived in Colorado, blanketing the landscape in a pristine white that seemed to hush the world around us. My family, my wife, Laura, my teenage son, Jake, and my younger daughter, Emma, had decided to escape the hustle and bustle of city life for a quiet Christmas getaway. We booked a room at the Old Blackwood Hotel, a relic from a bygone era nestled deep in the Rockies, promising solitude and a touch of old-world charm. The hotel stood at the end of a long, winding road, its grand facade partially obscured by towering pine trees heavy with snow. The building, once bustling with holiday cheer and lively guests, now exuded an air of abandonment. The windows were dark, some boarded up, and the entranceway was framed by ornate carvings that had dulled over the years. Despite its eerie appearance, the price was right, and the promise of an authentic, quiet retreat was too tempting to pass up. As we pulled up to the entrance, the heavy wooden doors creaked open, revealing a dimly lit lobby. The scent of aged wood and a faint hint of something floral, perhaps dried flowers from long ago, filled the air. The lobby was sparsely furnished, with a grand chandelier hanging precariously from the ceiling and a large, dusty fireplace that once must have been the heart of the hotel. An old-fashioned receptionist's desk stood against one wall, manned by a solitary figure hunched over a stack of papers. "Welcome to the Blackwood Hotel," the man said without looking up, his voice gravelly and distant. "How can I help you?" "We have a reservation under Thompson," I replied, handing him the confirmation slip. He glanced up, his eyes meeting mine for a brief moment before returning to his paperwork. "Ah, yes, room 217. You'll find the elevator just to your left. Enjoy your stay." We made our way to the elevator, the wooden floorboards groaning under our feet. The ride-up felt interminable, the flickering lights casting unsettling shadows on the walls. When the doors finally opened, we found ourselves in a long, narrow corridor lined with closed doors on either side. The wallpaper, once vibrant with intricate patterns, was now peeling and yellowed, and the carpet was thick with dust. Our room was at the far end of the hallway, a spacious suite with high ceilings and large windows overlooking the snowy landscape. The bed was grand, with a thick, heavy comforter and numerous pillows, and a large chandelier hung above, still glittering despite the years of neglect. We unpacked and settled in, the quiet of the night wrapping around us like a warm blanket. Dinner was a simple affair, consisting of takeout from a nearby diner. We ate in the cozy sitting area, the only sound the crackling of the fireplace and our occasional conversation. As midnight approached, a sense of tranquility settled over the room. We decided to retire for the night, eager to rest after our long journey. The first sign that something was wrong came shortly after we drifted off to sleep. I awoke to the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty corridor outside our room. Blinking groggily, I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 12:15 a.m. Confused, I nudged Laura awake. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. She stirred, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of concern and confusion. "Hear what?" "Footsteps. Someone's walking down the hallway." We sat up, the room bathed in the soft glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains. Jake and Emma were asleep, their breathing steady and calm. I reached for the remote to turn on the light, but it wouldn't respond. Laura stood up, her expression resolute. "Stay here," she instructed gently. "I'll check it out." I hesitated, unsure of how to explain what I had just witnessed. "I think there's something strange happening with the turkey," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. She grabbed her coat and stepped out of the room, the door closing behind her with a faint click. I listened intently, the sound of footsteps growing louder, more deliberate, as if someone was pacing back and forth in the hallway. Minutes felt like hours until Laura returned, her face pale and eyes wide with unease. "It's nothing," she said softly. "Probably just the building settling." But as the night wore on, strange occurrences became more frequent. The sound of laughter echoed through the halls, followed by the distant jingle of bells. Shadows seemed to move on their own, dancing just beyond the edge of my vision. Emma woke me, her voice trembling. "Daddy, I heard something, like Santa Claus laughing." I tried to reassure her, but the fear in her eyes mirrored my own. We huddled together, the atmosphere in the room growing colder despite the roaring fire. The whispers returned, more insistent this time, filling the room with an eerie, almost pleading tone. Around 2 a.m., the final straw came. I awoke to the sound of jingling bells and footsteps outside our room once again. Heart pounding, I got out of bed and approached the window, pulling back the curtains to peer into the darkness. There, standing in the middle of the hallway, was a man dressed as Santa Claus. He stood motionless, a sack of gifts slung over his shoulder, his face partially obscured by a bushy white beard and a red velvet hat. "Santa," I called out, my voice shaking. He turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting mine. There was a haunting sadness in his gaze, a depth of sorrow that contradicted the jolly facade of his costume. Before I could respond, he began to walk down the hallway, each step deliberate and heavy. I felt a chill run down my spine as he approached the door, pausing just before it. I reached out, my hand trembling as I grabbed the doorknob and opened the door. The corridor was empty, the snow-covered landscape outside untouched by any signs of life. The Santa figure had vanished, leaving behind only smudged handprints on the windowpane and a lingering sense of dread. "What do you want?" I demanded, stepping back into the room. The air felt thick with an unseen presence, the temperature dropping even further. Suddenly, the room was filled with the sound of children laughing, their voices echoing through the space. Jake and Emma stirred in their beds, confused by the noise. I turned to see shadows swirling around us, taking on the shapes of ghostly children playing in the snow. "Leave us alone," Laura whispered, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of sounds filling the room. But the manifestations persisted, the laughter growing louder, more frantic. Objects began to move on their own. The gifts from our sack rearranged themselves on the table, and the Christmas tree lights flickered uncontrollably. The atmosphere was oppressive, suffocating us with an invisible force. "We need to leave," I insisted, trying to regain control. "This isn't safe." But every attempt to leave was thwarted by the malevolent presence that now dominated the room. The Santa figure reappeared, his eyes burning with an otherworldly light, his voice a hollow echo. "Remember us?" the spirit whispered one final time, a plea for remembrance and respect. "Honor the traditions that bind us together." With those words, the presence lifted, the house returning to its former state of warmth and tranquility. The oppressive atmosphere was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace that settled over us like a comforting embrace. Story number 4. The Haunting of Christmas Eve. The snow had begun to fall softly over our quiet suburban neighborhood in Chicago, blanketing the streets and homes in a serene white silence. It was Christmas Eve, a night my family had always cherished with warmth and togetherness. This year, however, an unsettling event would forever change our perception of the holiday season. I'm Daniel Matthews, the eldest of 3 siblings in a family that prides itself on maintaining Christmas traditions. My parents, Linda and Robert, and my younger sister, Emily, had always embraced the magic of the season, decorating the tree, baking cookies, and exchanging heartfelt gifts were rituals that bound us together, creating memories that felt almost sacred. As the day progressed, the excitement built up to the evening when my parents decided to surprise us with a gift. It was a small, intricately carved wooden box, no larger than a jewelry case, wrapped in simple brown paper with no name or indication of who it might be from. The box sat atop the mantel in our living room, an enigma amidst the familiar decorations. "Where did this come from?" Emily asked, her curiosity piqued as she reached for the box. My father shrugged, a puzzled expression on his face. "I have no idea. We didn't order anything recently." Intrigued, we gathered around the mantel, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. My mother carefully untied the ribbon and lifted the lid, revealing an old Santa Claus costume nestled inside. The fabric was worn and faded, the red velvet dulled with age, and a foul odor emanated from it, a stark contrast to the sweet sense of cinnamon and pine that filled the room. "Who would send us this?" Robert muttered, his brow furrowed in confusion. Before anyone could respond, a cold chill swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging us into darkness. The only light now came from the soft glow of the Christmas tree, its ornaments shimmering eerily in the dimness. We exchanged uneasy glances, the festive atmosphere now tainted by an inexplicable tension. As we sat in silence, the first signs of something amiss began to surface. Faint footsteps echoed from within the walls, a rhythmic tapping that seemed to grow louder with each passing minute. My heart raced as I glanced around, feeling the weight of unseen eyes watching us. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "Probably just the house settling," my father replied, though his tone lacked conviction. But the noises persisted, evolving into indistinct whispers that filled the room with a sense of foreboding. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and a pervasive feeling of being watched settled over us like a heavy blanket. Unable to ignore the mounting unease, Robert stood up and approached the walls, pressing his ear against the cold plaster. "There's something here," he declared, though his voice wavered. "I can hear something." Before anyone could react, the Santa costume began to move on its own, the limbs stiff and unnatural. It sat upright on the mantel, its head tilting as if observing us with malevolent intent. The foul smell intensified, the odor now overpowering the room with its decay. A sudden gust of wind howled through the house, slamming the doors shut and rattling the windows. The temperature dropped further, our breaths visible in the icy air as the whispers morphed into anguished cries that reverberated through the halls. Emily clutched my arm, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to get out of here," she pleaded, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of sounds. But the house seemed to resist our attempts to leave. Doors wouldn't budge, windows remained sealed tight, and the oppressive atmosphere grew heavier with each passing second. It was as if the very structure of our home was conspiring against us, trapping us within its haunted confines. Desperate for answers, I grabbed the wooden box, feeling its unsettling energy pulsing through my fingers. "Maybe there's something inside that can help us understand what's happening," I suggested, my voice steady despite the fear gripping my heart. With trembling hands, I reopened the box, revealing the old Santa costume once more. As I lifted the headpiece, a piercing scream echoed through the house, the sound of torment and rage that sent shivers down my spine. The costume began to glow with an unnatural light, the fabric twisting and contorting into a grotesque semblance of the jolly figure it once represented. A shadowy apparition materialized before us, its form indistinct and shifting. It stood tall, the outlines of the old Santa suit now warped and sinister, eyes burning with a malevolent fire that seemed to pierce our very souls. The room grew colder still, the air thick with the presence of something ancient and vengeful. "You dare to disturb my slumber," the apparition intoned, its voice a chilling blend of sorrow and wrath. "You have forgotten the true spirit of Christmas, the sacrifice that must be made." My father stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. "We honor Christmas with love and unity. We would never forget your legacy." The apparition laughed, a sound devoid of joy and filled with bitterness. "Legacy? You squandered the true meaning, lost in the trappings of modernity and neglect." As the words hung heavy in the air, the house seemed to come alive with the anguish of forgotten traditions and broken promises. The whispers returned, now a chorus of lost souls crying out for remembrance and respect, determined to put an end to the haunting. My mother joined me in the kitchen, where she had gathered a bundle of herbs and incense from our gardening supplies. "Maybe we can cleanse the house, restore the balance," she suggested, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. Together, we began to perform a cleansing ritual, lighting the incense and spreading the herbs around the rooms, chanting prayers that my father had learned from his own childhood. The air grew thick with the scent of burning herbs, the oppressive chill gradually lifting as the candles were reignited by an unseen hand. The apparition watched us, its eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Why do you seek to cleanse what has already been tainted?" it demanded, the rage in its voice softening to a sorrowful lament. "We seek to honor the true spirit of Christmas," I replied, my voice unwavering, "to remember the love and unity that define this season." As we continued the ritual, the whispers transformed into gentle hums, the anguished cries giving way to a soothing melody that filled the house with a sense of peace. The apparition began to fade, its form dissolving into the light of the candles as the darkness receded. "Remember us," the spirit whispered one final time, a plea for remembrance and respect. "Honor the traditions that bind us together." With those words, the presence lifted, the house returning to its former state of warmth and tranquility. The oppressive atmosphere was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace that settled over us like a comforting embrace. Exhausted but relieved, we gathered around the mantel, the old Santa costume now just a lifeless piece of fabric. The foul odor dissipated. The wooden box lay empty, the mystery of its origin still unresolved. But the haunting presence that had threatened our Christmas had been quelled by our unity and respect for tradition. That Christmas Eve remains etched in our memories, a testament to the importance of honoring our past and the traditions that define us. We left our suburban home in Chicago with a renewed appreciation for the true spirit of the season, the love and unity that bind us together even in the face of the unknown. In the years that followed, the mysterious wooden box never found its way back into our lives, and the old Santa costume remained a silent reminder of that harrowing night. We continued our Christmas traditions with a deeper sense of gratitude, knowing that the love and unity we shared could overcome even the darkest of forces. Sometimes, late at night, I catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure in the corner of my eye or hear the faint sound of bells jingling in the distance. But now, instead of fear, those moments bring a sense of peace and reverence, a reminder of the night we faced the haunting Santa and emerged stronger together. The legacy of that Christmas Eve lives on in our hearts, ensuring that the true meaning of the holiday remains at the forefront of our celebrations. Love, unity, and the enduring power of family. Epilogue. Years have passed since that unforgettable Christmas Eve. Yet the lessons learned remain a cornerstone of our family's traditions. We've rebuilt our lives with a newfound respect for the past and a deeper appreciation for the bonds that hold us together. The memory of the haunted night serves as a reminder to cherish each other and honor the traditions that define us. The wooden box and the old Santa costume are now locked away in the attic. Symbols of a night when faith and unity triumphed over darkness. They serve as a silent testament to the strength of our family and the enduring spirit of Christmas that continues to guide us through life's challenges. As I recount this story to my own children, I emphasize the importance of love, respect, and unity, ensuring that the true spirit of Christmas remains alive in our hearts. The haunting Santa of our Christmas Eve is no longer a figure of fear, but a guardian of our traditions, reminding us to honor the past while embracing the future. And so, each Christmas, as the snow begins to fall and the lights adorn our home, we gather together with hearts full of gratitude and spirits lifted by the love that binds us. The legacy of that haunted night lives on, ensuring that our family remains united, forever bound by the true meaning of Christmas. Story number 5. Santa's haunting at Blackwood Manor. The Texas winter is a deceptive thing. While most of the state basks in mild temperatures, the nights can plunge into biting cold, especially in the rural stretches where the wind whispers through barren trees and abandoned structures. Our group of friends, Lily, Mark, Jenna, and me, had always been thrill seekers, drawn to the macabre and mysterious. So, when we heard about Blackwood Manor, an old, abandoned house deep in the countryside, it was irresistible. The stories surrounding it were enough to send shivers down even the bravest spine. Tales of unexplained noises, ghostly apparitions, and a sinister presence that seemed to linger every Christmas season. I'm Ethan, and as we drove down the winding dirt roads towards Blackwood Manor, excitement buzzed through the air. The manor stood isolated, its once grand facade now cloaked in ivy and shadowed by towering oak trees. The windows were boarded up, and the gate creaked ominously in the wind as we pushed it open. Felt like stepping back in time, the house exuding a sense of forgotten grandeur and untold secrets. We arrived just as dusk began to settle, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink before giving way to the deepening blue of night. Our plan was simple: spend the night exploring the manor, documenting any paranormal activity, and capturing evidence of the supernatural. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and a healthy dose of skepticism, we stepped into the grand entryway. The interior was cold and damp, the air thick with the scent of mold and decay. Our footsteps echoed through the vast, empty halls as we made our way to the main living area. The fireplace stood cold, the hearth long unused, and the once opulent furniture lay covered in dust and cobwebs. We set up our equipment, the silence of the house amplifying every creak and groan of the old structure. As midnight approached, we settled into the living room, the only light coming from the flickering candles we had lit to ward off the darkness. We shared stories and laughed nervously, the tension of being alone in the haunted manor slowly dissipating. But as the clock struck 12, the atmosphere shifted. A chill swept through the room, and the temperature seemed to drop drastically. My breath became visible in the cold air, and an uneasy silence settled over us. Then, we heard it, the faint sound of bells jingling, like those of a sleigh, followed by the unmistakable thud of footsteps approaching the front door. We exchanged startled glances, our hearts pounding in our chests. The windows were tightly sealed, no breeze to explain the movement of curtains or the sounds outside. Yet, the noises persisted, growing louder and more distinct. "Did you guys hear that?" Jenna whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes," Lily replied, clutching her flashlight tightly. It sounded like Santa Claus. We approached the front door cautiously, the lights from our flashlights casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. I reached out to open the door, my hand trembling with a mix of fear and adrenaline. As the door creaked open, we peered outside, expecting to see a prankster in a Santa suit or maybe an animal rummaging through the yard. Instead, we were met with the chilling sight of a man dressed as Santa Claus standing in the snow-covered front yard. His costume was tattered and dirty, the red fabric faded and stained, His face was obscured by a thick, unkempt beard, and his eyes seemed hollow, devoid of the jolly warmth we typically associate with Santa. He stood motionless, staring directly at us with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Santa?" Mark asked, his voice wavering. "Are you Santa Claus?" Before any of us could respond, the figure began to dissolve, his form fading into the cold night air until there was nothing left but the lingering sense of dread and the smudged handprints he had left on the windowpane. We stood there, frozen, the eerie silence enveloping us once more. "What was that?" Jenna demanded, trying to mask her fear with a shaky laugh. "Probably just a guy in a costume," Mark suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. But as we turned to retreat back into the safety of the living room, the atmosphere grew heavier, the shadows seemed to lengthen and twist, and the sound of soft whispers filled the air, barely audible but undeniably present. It was as if the house itself was alive, reacting to the presence of the spectral Santa. We decided to continue our exploration, hoping to uncover more about the manor's haunted history. As we ventured through the darkened halls, the whispers followed us, growing louder and more insistent. Strange, fleeting images darted at the edges of our vision, shadowy figures that disappeared when we turned to look directly at them. In the dining room, we found a long table set for a Christmas feast, the dishes still in place as if waiting for guests long gone. The candles were half burned, their flames flickering erratically. As we examined the room, the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony of voices, each one overlapping the other, creating a disorienting and unnerving soundscape. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us, plunging the room into darkness as the candles extinguished themselves. Panic set in as we fumbled for our flashlights, the beams of light cutting through the blackness only to reveal the same haunted Santa standing at the far end of the table, his eyes glowing with an unholy light. "You should not be here," he intoned, his voice echoing unnaturally through the room. "Leave now, before it's too late." We backed away, but the room seemed to close in around us, the walls moving inwards as if the house was trying to trap us inside. The whispers transformed into guttural growls, and the temperature plummeted further, our breaths visible in the freezing air. Mark tried to rationalize. "It's just our imagination. Let's get out of here." But as we turned to flee, the door wouldn't budge. The haunted Santa advanced toward us, each step sending waves of fear through our bodies. Desperate, I remembered an old legend my grandmother had told me about restless spirits and how strong family bonds could appease them. "Maybe we need to honor the spirit," I suggested, my voice barely a whisper. Lily nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "We need to show respect." Gathering our courage, we formed a circle around the table. Holding hands tightly, I began to speak softly, reciting prayers and sharing heartfelt words of peace and remembrance. The haunted Santa paused, his form flickering as the energy in the room shifted. The whispers softened, becoming harmonious and soothing, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as the temperature began to rise. Slowly, the figure of Santa began to fade, his eyes losing their malevolent glow. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice now gentle and sorrowful. "Remember the true spirit of Christmas." With those final words, he vanished, the room returning to its former state of calm. The candles relit themselves, their flames steady and warm, and the door swung open freely. Exhausted but relieved, we stepped out of the dining room, the oppressive presence lifting as we made our way back to the living room. The night had taken a dark turn, but through our unity and respect, we had managed to quell the restless spirit that haunted Blackwood Manor. As dawn broke, the first light of Christmas morning filtered through the broken windows, casting a hopeful glow on the snow-covered landscape. We left Blackwood Manor that day with a newfound appreciation for the bonds that held us together and the true meaning of the holiday season. The experience had been harrowing, but it reinforced the importance of family, love, and the enduring spirit of Christmas that transcends even the darkest of nights. In the years that followed, we never spoke of that night again, but the memory lingered, a silent testament to the power of unity in the face of the unknown. Blackwood Manor remains abandoned, a place of mystery and legend, but for us, it holds a special place in our hearts as the site where we confronted fear and emerged stronger together. Sometimes, during quiet moments, I catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure in the corner of my eye or hear the faint sound of bells jingling in the distance. But now, instead of fear, those moments bring a sense of peace and gratitude, a reminder of the night we faced the haunting Santa and triumphed through the strength of our family bond. And so, each Christmas, as we gather around our own tree, the spirit of that night lives on in our hearts. We honor the memory of Blackwood Manor and the lessons it taught us, ensuring that the true meaning of Christmas remains at the forefront of our celebrations. Love, unity, and the enduring power of family. Epilogue. Years have passed since that unforgettable Christmas Eve at Blackwood Manor. Yet the lessons learned remain etched in our lives. Our family grew closer, each member cherishing the bonds that were strengthened in the face of supernatural adversity. We moved forward with a deeper understanding of the importance of honoring traditions and respecting the spirits that watch over us. Whether seen or unseen, the legend of the haunted Santa became a family tale, a story shared with new generations as a reminder of that magical yet terrifying night. Each Christmas, as we decorate the tree and exchange gifts, we remember the courage it took to face our fears and the love that held us together when darkness threatened to consume us. Blackwood Manor stands as a silent sentinel in the countryside, its secrets preserved within its decaying walls. Visitors who dare to venture near speak of strange lights and eerie sounds during the holiday season, perpetuating the legend that my family and I helped to dispel, or perhaps understand a little better. We respect the manor's history, knowing that some stories are meant to be honored rather than solved. In quiet moments, when the snow falls softly and the world is hushed under a blanket of white, I reflect on that Christmas night. The echoes of the haunted Santa's words resonate within me, a perpetual reminder to cherish the present, honor the past, and hold dear the family that stands beside me. The true spirit of Christmas, I've learned, lies not in the decorations or the feast, but in the love and unity that bind us together, transcending time and the shadows of fear. As I share this story, I hope it serves as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unbreakable bonds of family. May it remind us all to embrace the light of the holiday season, to face our fears with courage, and to celebrate the enduring power of love that can overcome even the darkest of nights. Story number 6. Shadows of Christmas Night. The first snowfall in Ohio had transformed our rented farmhouse into a picturesque winter scene. My family and I had decided to escape the chaos of city life and spend Christmas in this secluded retreat. Nestled on the outskirts of a small town surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills, the house, an old Victorian with creaky floors and ornate woodwork, held a charm that promised a perfect holiday until that fateful Christmas Eve. I'm Michael Anderson, the eldest of 3 siblings, and as we drove up the winding gravel path, the twinkling lights of the farmhouse welcomed us like a beacon of warmth against the cold December night. My parents, Laura and David, had found the house online, a beautiful, albeit slightly run-down, property that seemed perfect for our family gathering. The excitement was palpable as we unpacked and began decorating the grand Christmas tree in the spacious living room. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air, mingling with the aroma of my mother's famous mulled cider. Laughter echoed through the rooms as we hung ornaments and placed stockings by the fireplace. Despite the house's age, it exuded a cozy atmosphere, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. It was a scene straight out of a holiday card, one that I cherished deeply. As night fell, we gathered around the tree, exchanging gifts and sharing stories from the past year. The warmth from the fire contrasted sharply with the biting cold outside, creating a sanctuary where love and joy thrived. My younger sister, Emma, was busy setting up her new dollhouse, while my brother, Jake, entertained us with his latest joke. Everything seemed perfect until the clock struck midnight. A heavy silence settled over the house. The only sound the crackling of the fire and the occasional pop of the logs. It was then that we heard it, a series of deliberate, heavy footsteps echoing from the upstairs hallway. First, we dismissed it as the house settling or perhaps an animal wandering through. But as the footsteps grew louder and more distinct, unease began to creep into our festive gathering. "Did you guys hear that?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with worry. "Probably just the wind," my father replied, trying to maintain his composure. "Old houses make a lot of noises." But the footsteps continued, rhythmic and purposeful, as if someone was walking up and down the hallway. My mother exchanged a worried glance with my father, her usually steady demeanor faltering for the first time. "Maybe we should check it out," she suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. Reluctantly, we all agreed. Jake and I grabbed flashlights, the beams cutting through the darkness as we ascended the creaky staircase. The air grew colder with each step, the chill seeping into our bones. As we reached the top of the stairs, the footsteps abruptly stopped, leaving an oppressive silence in their wake. We moved cautiously toward the end of the hallway, the flashlight beams sweeping across the faded wallpaper and dusty portraits that adorned the walls. It was then that we saw him, a figure dressed in a traditional Santa Claus suit, standing motionless in the corner of the room. His red coat was slightly tattered, and his white beard was unkempt, giving him a disheveled appearance. His eyes, however, were piercing and lifeless, staring directly at us with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Santa," Jake whispered, his bravado replaced by genuine fear. Before any of us could react, the figure began to move toward us, each step slow and deliberate. My heart pounded in my chest as we backed away. But as we did, the Santa figure began to fade, his form dissolving into thin air until there was nothing left but the empty corner of the room. We stood there, breathless and trembling, trying to make sense of what we had just witnessed. "We need to leave," my mother insisted, her voice trembling. "Something's not right here." We hurried back downstairs, the festive atmosphere now tainted by the eerie encounter. The living room felt different, the shadows longer and more menacing. As we settled back around the tree, the temperature seemed to drop even further, our breaths visible in the frigid air. The oppressive silence was broken once more by the faint sound of whispers, barely audible but unmistakably present. That night, sleep eluded us all. Each of us lay in our separate bedrooms, haunted by the image of the spectral Santa and the unsettling presence that lingered in the house. Morning brought little relief, as we found the same Santa figure standing once again in the upstairs hallway, his eyes fixed on us with an unholy determination. Attempts to approach him resulted in the figure vanishing, leaving behind only smeared handprints on the window large, dirty prints that seemed to mock our attempts to uncover the truth. Desperate for answers, we delved into the house's history, uncovering stories of previous occupants who had reported similar sightings during the holiday season. It became clear that the house was plagued by restless spirits, entities unable to find peace amidst the joy and celebration that Christmas brought. The cursed Santa was a manifestation of their unresolved anger and sorrow, a dark reflection of the holiday's true meaning gone awry. As the days progressed, the haunting intensified. Objects moved on their own, lights flickered without cause, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. My brother Jake, ever the skeptic, began to waver in his disbelief, while Emma's once playful spirit was crushed under the weight of our nightly terrors. My parents, too, struggled to maintain their composure, their love for each other and for us keeping us together amidst the chaos. One particularly stormy night, as thunder rumbled outside and lightning illuminated the dark corners of the house, the presence became undeniable. The spectral Santa appeared once more, his form solidifying into a grotesque parody of the jolly figure we had once adored. His eyes burned with malice, and his smile twisted into a sinister grin. "You shouldn't have come here," he growled, his voice echoing through the halls like the tolling of a death knell. "This is not a place for your kind." Terrified, we huddled together, trying to find solace in each other's presence. But the cursed Santa was relentless, his presence filling the house with an oppressive darkness that threatened to consume us. Desperate to end the nightmare, my father recalled an old family ritual meant to ward off evil spirits, an ancient prayer passed down through generations, meant to restore peace and harmony. Gathering our courage, we joined hands and began to recite the prayer, our voices trembling but united in purpose. The house seemed to tremble in response, the shadows recoiling as if the light of our combined voices was pushing them back. The cursed Santa let out a final, anguished scream before dissolving into the ether, his presence banished by the strength of our unity and faith. Exhausted but relieved, we collapsed into each other's arms, the weight of the ordeal finally lifting. The house, once a sanctuary of joy, had been transformed into a battleground between light and darkness, love and sorrow. But through it all, our family had stood strong, bound together by the love that no spirit could ever hope to break. That Christmas, we left the old farmhouse with a newfound appreciation for the bonds that held us together and the traditions that defined us. The memory of the cursed Santa lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the importance of cherishing the moments we have with those we love. In the years that followed, we never returned to that old house, the shadows of that Christmas night forever etched into our hearts. But the lessons learned stayed with us, lessons of resilience, unity, and the enduring power of family. And every Christmas, as we gather around our own tree, we do so with a deeper understanding of the true meaning of the holiday, honoring the love and light that bind us together, no matter the darkness that may sometimes surround us. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is silent and the snow falls gently outside, I can still feel the presence of that Christmas Eve. A whisper in the wind, a shadow at the corner of my eye. But now, instead of fear, it serves as a reminder of the strength we found in each other and the love that can overcome even the darkest of shadows. The cursed Santa of Ohio is no longer a figure of terror, but a symbol of the resilience and unity that define our family, ensuring that our bonds remain unbroken, now and forever. Story number 7. The Haunting of West Virginia's Santa. The first snowfall of December had transformed our small West Virginia town into a picturesque winter wonderland. Our house, an old Victorian with creaky floors and ornate woodwork, stood proudly at the end of Maple Street. Every year, my family and I eagerly anticipated Christmas, embracing the warmth and joy that the holiday season brought. This year, however, an unsettling presence loomed over our festivities, casting a shadow that none of us could explain. I'm Emily Thompson, the middle child in a family of 4. My parents, Sarah and David, and my older brother, Jake, had always instilled in us a deep love for Christmas traditions. Decorating the tree, baking cookies, and singing carols were rituals that bound us together, creating memories that lasted a lifetime. But this year felt different from the start, an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It was a chilly December evening when the first sign of something amiss appeared. We were gathered in the living room, stringing lights on the tree and hanging ornaments passed down through generations. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air, mingling with the soft glow of candlelight. Laughter echoed through the rooms, masking the unease that had settled over us like a heavy blanket. As my father carefully placed the star atop the tree, my mother was in the kitchen, preparing our traditional Christmas dinner. Jake and I were busy with the decorations, chatting about our plans for the holidays. The house was alive with the spirit of Christmas, but there was an unspoken tension that none of us addressed directly. Around 7 p.m., as twilight gave way to the deepening night, we decided to take a break and gather around the fireplace with mugs of hot cocoa. The warmth from the fire was comforting, and the flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls. It was then that we noticed him, a man dressed in a traditional Santa Claus outfit, standing outside our window. At first, we thought it was just a neighbor, perhaps returning late from a holiday event. But as we watched, the man remained still, his face hidden beneath the red velvet hat and white beard. His eyes, however, seemed to pierce through the darkness, fixed intently on our house. There was an eerie stillness about him, an unsettling presence that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. "Did you see that?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I replied, feeling a chill despite the warmth of the room. "It's probably just someone in a Santa suit." My father, always the skeptic, stood up and walked over to the window. He looked out, scrutinizing the figure. "Santa?" he mused, a hint of doubt in his voice. "That's odd. There's no event tonight." Curiosity piqued. My mother joined him at the window. Together, we watched as the man remained motionless, his presence unnervingly silent. After a few tense moments, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night as swiftly as he had appeared. Relieved, we turned back to our gathering. But the unease lingered. Moments later, my father approached the window once more, this time holding a cloth to wipe away the condensation. As he did, we noticed something disturbing: dirty handprints smeared across the glass, large and messy, as if someone had forcefully grabbed the window before fleeing. "What the hell was that?" Jake exclaimed, his earlier skepticism replaced by fear. We exchanged nervous glances, the festive atmosphere now tainted by the inexplicable event. My father tried to rationalize it, suggesting it might have been a prank or an unfortunate accident. But deep down, we all knew something more sinister was at play. That night, as we sat in our rooms, the house seemed to come alive with an unseen presence. Doors creaked open and shut on their own, and faint whispers echoed through the halls. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the man in the Santa suit was still lurking in the shadows of our home. The next morning, the events of the previous night were still fresh in our minds. We decided to investigate, hoping to find a logical explanation. But as we searched the house, we found nothing out of the ordinary, no signs of forced entry, no footprints leading away from the window, and no clue as to who the mysterious Santa might have been. Days passed, and the strange occurrences continued. Objects moved on their own, lights flickered without reason, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The air in the house felt heavy, charged with a malevolent energy that left us all on edge. It was clear that whatever had entered our home was not going to leave peacefully. One night, as Christmas approached, the disturbances reached a fever pitch. We were preparing for our traditional Christmas dinner, the aroma of roasting turkey filling the house. As we set the table, I glanced out the window and saw him again, the same man in the Santa suit, standing in the snow-covered yard, his eyes fixed on our house with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Stay inside," my father warned, sensing the danger. "We need to protect ourselves." But before we could react, the man vanished, leaving behind only the dirty handprints on the window. Panic set in as the house began to shake, windows rattling violently and the ground beneath us trembling. The whispers turned into anguished cries, filling the air with a sense of impending doom. Desperate to end the nightmare, we gathered in the living room, clutching each other for support. My father, determined to find answers, pulled out an old family Bible, hoping to invoke some form of protection. "We need to stand together," he declared, his voice steady despite the chaos around us. "We won't let this entity harm us." As he began to pray, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, our breaths visible in the icy air. The spirit of the cursed Santa seemed to materialize before us, his form twisted and menacing, a far cry from the jolly figure we had seen. His eyes burned with rage and sorrow, and his presence filled the room with a palpable sense of fear. "You dare defy us?" he growled, his voice echoing through the sanctuary. You forgot the true meaning of Christmas, the sacrifice that must be made. Tears welled in my mother's eyes as she stepped forward, her voice trembling. We honor Christmas with love and unity. We would never forget your legacy. The cursed Santa let out a blood-curdling scream, a sound that seemed to pierce through our very souls. The room shook violently, the walls closing in as the spirit advanced toward us. Desperation took hold, and we joined hands, forming a circle of protection around our family. In a last-ditch effort to appease the vengeful spirit, my father began to recite passages from the Bible, his voice rising above the chaos. We seek peace and forgiveness. Let go of your anger and find rest. The cursed Santa paused, his form wavering as if struggling against an unseen force. The whispers softened, becoming more harmonious, a stark contrast to the torment they had once been. Slowly, the spirit began to dissipate, his form dissolving into the ether as the room returned to its previous state of calm. Exhausted but relieved, we stood together. The oppressive energy lifted from our home. The dirty handprints on the window seemed to fade, leaving no trace of the malevolent presence that had plagued us. We had faced the darkness and emerged united, our family's bond stronger than ever. That Christmas Eve remains etched in our memories, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. We never returned to St. Michael's Church, the abandoned sanctuary now a place of fear rather than solace. The cursed Santa of West Virginia became a cautionary tale, a story we shared with each generation to honor the importance of unity, love, and the true spirit of Christmas. In the years that followed, our home remained a haven of warmth and joy, the shadows of that haunting night slowly fading into the background. Yet, sometimes, late at night, I still hear faint whispers and catch glimpses of a shadowy figure near the window, a subtle reminder of the cursed Santa who once sought revenge for forgotten traditions. As I recount this story to my own children, I emphasize the lessons learned from that terrifying experience, the importance of cherishing our loved ones, honoring our traditions, and standing together in the face of adversity are values that have become even more significant to us. The haunting of our Christmas dinner taught us that the true meaning of the holiday lies not in the decorations or the feast, but in the bonds we share and the love that unites us. And so, as each Christmas approaches, we gather together with gratitude and reverence, knowing that the legacy of the cursed Santa lives on in our hearts. The spirit of that haunted night serves as a reminder to never take our traditions for granted, to honor the past while embracing the future, and to hold dear the family ties that bind us together through the darkest of times. Epilogue. Years have passed since that fateful Christmas, and life in our small West Virginia town has returned to its peaceful rhythm. The memory of the cursed Santa remains a haunting echo in our family history, a story of fear and resilience that continues to shape our traditions. We have rebuilt our faith in the true spirit of Christmas, fostering an environment of love, understanding, and unwavering unity. Occasionally, visitors to our home remark on the warmth and harmony that fills our rooms. Unaware of the dark secrets that once threatened to tear us apart, we smile, sharing only a knowing glance, protecting our children from the full extent of our past. The cursed Santa of West Virginia is no longer a figure of terror, but a symbol of the strength we found in each other when faced with the unknown. As I watch my children decorate their own Christmas trees, I am reminded of the importance of passing down our stories and lessons. The haunting presence that once lurked in our home has been transformed into a legacy of love and resilience, ensuring that the true meaning of Christmas endures for generations to come. And so, as snowflakes continue to fall softly outside our window, blanketing the world in a serene embrace, we sit together, hearts full and spirits lifted. The cursed Santa of West Virginia is no longer a tale of horror, but a story of redemption and the enduring power of family bonds, forever etched into the fabric of our lives and the spirit of Christmas.